one of the things that I've always loved about real estate is that it's not an experiment, right? Since the dawn of civilization, wealth has been measured in land ownership.
Designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and today's guest is Tim Bratz with Legacy Wealth Holding. Tim, say hello to our podcast audience on Apple iTunes.
Kyle, appreciate you having me. Excited to be here, buddy. Thank you for all the value that you bring.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm excited, and I appreciate you being on the show. For our podcast audience, most of the people that listen in are in the real estate industry in some fashion. Real estate professionals love to listen to our podcast, and you'll know, though, from listening to former podcast episodes that I specialize in the sale of multifamily properties. So today is going to be all about real estate investing. And we're going to talk about multifamily investing and why that's different from single-family investing. So, Tim, you're hitting right at the heart of what I do. The company that I own here in Denver, all of us are focused on real estate investing and brokering deals from 2 units to as big as 54 units, at least in our marketplace. That's our bandwidth that we typically work within. Let's talk about how you got started, and then also why multifamily investing and how many units you currently own and operate.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going through college when the market was going gangbusters last time, right? So 2003 to 2007, I was money motivated back then. And people said, if you want to make money, all you need is a pulse to make money in real estate, right? And so I ended up graduated from college. I moved out to New York City. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, originally. That's where I live right now. But my brother lived in New York City. So I moved out there after college and got a job in real estate. I got my real estate license and became a commercial real estate broker. But instead of doing sales, really, I did leasing. And so I would lease retail space or office space on these long-term leases. And, my first deal that I ever closed was only 400 square feet in downtown Manhattan. Actually, not downtown, it was in the Village. And it was a $10,000 a month lease term and a 4% annual escalation along with a 12-year term. And so $10,000 a month times 12 years with 4% escalations, you do the math on that, and all of a sudden you're like, this guy, the landlord, is going to make almost $2 million over the next 12 years for doing something at one point in time. And for me, I ran and that was just one retail space. He had 8 retail spaces total and about 15 stories of apartments above it. And so for me, I realized like I need to own real estate. And so I ended up moving down to Charleston, South Carolina. I lived down there for about 5 years. And just kind of, I think I went through this phase where a lot of people get involved in real estate because they want the passive income, they want the residual income of it. But then they get stuck in this transactional wheel well. And that happened to me, flipping houses. And that was cool because I made a lot of money, but then I had to go do it again in order to make more money again and again and again. And wanted to get into more holding of properties and really, long-term legacy wealth kind of building. And so started partnering up with some people, eventually ended up having people came to me and said, hey, listen, I got the cash, but I don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge in order to go out and do these deals. Can we figure out some sort of an equity split? So they'd put up the cash, I'd do the work, and we'd do deals that way. And then I got engaged to my wife, Kate, in 2012 and moved back in about early 2013 to Cleveland, Ohio. And so I've been in Cleveland for the past 6.5 years. And when I moved back, I had 2 guys specifically who reached out to me and said, hey, listen, we want to put up the money. You go do all the work and we'll carve up the equity. And so they had 67% ownership. I had 33% ownership. And I did everything. I found deals. I negotiated the deals. I did all the due diligence. I handled all the leasing. I handled all the rent collection. Sometimes I was swinging a hammer and making actual improvements. And we just kind of did a little bit of everything. We did some low end flips. We did some high end flips. We bought some single family rentals. We bought some small multifamily rentals. And after the first year, I realized that I really liked, for what my long-term goals were, the apartment buildings and the multifamily was where I wanted to spend my time. I wasn't really good at doing the HGTV kind of flips and dealing with emotional buyers and sellers and all this other stuff. It was really easy for me to run the numbers and just focus on rental properties. And I liked the scalability that apartments had over single family rentals. And so I sold everything else and just kept on, doubling down on apartments and just organically building it. And my partners put up, a couple $100,000 initially, and ended up over the course of our partnership, put up about $1 million. And I was able to go and buy things and fix it all up and stabilize it and sell it and just trade up from an 8 unit to a 14 unit to a 23 unit to a 31 unit. My 31 unit, which was like the crown jewel of my operation, ended up burning down. Right. So then I had to go back and build some other stuff and built a portfolio of about 150 units. That partnership actually kind of went south. We'll probably talk about that a little later. I'm happy to go into that, but that was a really, really tough time in my life. And we ended up parting ways, but it really put me in a position to go and do my own thing and build up my own portfolio. And today, fast forward, a few years later, my current portfolio has a little over 2,500 units, apartments, about 95% apartments, about 5% is office. And then I have another 650 units under contract closing in the next 3 weeks. So I'll be a little over 3,200 units all in, which is kind of crazy, right? Before my 34th birthday. I turn 34 next month.
Well, happy early birthday. I turn 37 next month. So we're kind of in a similar spot, similar career path, similar timing as we look at just life and just kind of getting to the latter half, for me at least, of my 30s, and you're in the middle of your 30s. All right, so we'll talk about the partnership in just a moment, but let's pause for just a second for our audience. I love real estate investing because it's tangible. You can go and you can actually operate it. Like you said, you can swing a hammer, you can meet your vendors, you can frankly get some inside information that enables you to perform better than maybe your competition. I got my degree in finance years ago, and I really was interested in financial markets. But the thing that I just kind of struggled with is it felt like it was so intangible. So what are some things that you enjoy about real estate investing for those that maybe have kind of understand that obviously it's tangible and it's movable, but some of those things where you can really do some research and find a deal, whereas some other types of investments can be a little bit more commoditized, a little bit more, everything is exactly as you see it. How do you find value in real estate, or what are some of the things you like about the fact that real estate is one of these old-fashioned businesses that's not heavily securitized?
So that's a really, really good question. I've never had that question posed to me before. And as you're asking me the question, I'm trying to think of the answer. And I think one of the things that I've always loved about real estate is that it's not an experiment, right? Since the dawn of civilization, wealth has been measured in land ownership. And for me to go and invest in a startup company or a tech company or something that doesn't have a proven model yet, to me, I'm not that risk averse for something like that. I like to see and study successful people. And what I've learned from people who are financially successful, they've either made their money in real estate or they've made their money somewhere else and then put all their money into real estate because it is so stable, it is so predictable, and that is how wealth is built. And so that to me has that tangibleness to it. Again, it's something that's been around forever, will continue to be around forever, and I like the stability of real estate from a standpoint of being able to go in and it's very predictable. I can't predict if somebody, in some Fortune 500 company is cooking the books. I can't predict if there's, some CEO that says some unsavory things to some female employees and then all of a sudden gets ousted and, or if Volkswagen or Volvo is cheating emission tests, right? Or whoever it was. And if Elon Musk smokes a joint on public television and the stock drops by 20%, I don't have any control over that. And I don't like that about traditional, commodities, right? Traditional investments. What I can control is the real estate that I own. And I can go and look at an apartment building and I can tell it's a fixed number how much work it needs, right? I can go to get a contractor, how much is it going to cost for windows, how much is it going to cost for roof, how much is it going to cost for plumbing and electric and cosmetics. And so that's very easy for me to quantify that. And then I can take a look at the different cap rates and the valuations in the marketplace. What's a market rate rent? What could I rent this thing for? Okay, here's where the expenses are. It gives you, the net operating income. And then it's just a multiple of that number, the cap rate, essentially, that can give you what the value is afterwards. So I know what a building is worth when it's stabilized before I ever even go and put it under contract, right? So it's very predictable for me to understand. And I buy all value add. I don't buy almost anything that's stabilized. Usually my properties are pretty heavy lifts. They're usually 50 to 70% occupied at best. And then we go in, we renovate it, we bump up rents to market rate rents. We don't try to charge a premium. We just want the nicest, cleanest, safest, most functional buildings and units in the entire area, because then we're going to attract the best tenants to our properties, and they're not going to leave either, because the other options are not nearly what they can get with us. So, it's all value driven, and again, it's very predictable. I have lower maintenance that way. I know exactly what my operating expenses are going to be on an ongoing basis. And the banks, if I go get a loan on it or I refinance or whatever that process looks like, I know if I just hold this thing about what my income is going to be long term. So it allows me to have a lot more predictability than I think in the traditional stock market, and a lot more control over it too. I trust myself more than I trust somebody else, I guess, to run their business.
I love your answer. We're very well aligned. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I was nodding my head, agreeing with everything you were saying. Great points. And you spoke about debt. And I want to debunk some thoughts that some people might have listening to this. That, first of all, I was a financial peace university coordinator, which is a Dave Ramsey class, for years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in having a strong financial foundation before you do any investing.
Agreed.
And there's a lot of ways to invest that don't involve debt. So one of the things I think a lot of people assume is that, someone's getting a loan to purchase the property, and then someone's also maybe getting subordinate debt, either that's actually part of the collateral or is a personal guarantee loan outside of the deal. And what I mean by that is sometimes people will go out and get a 70 or 75% loan to value with a bank, and then they'll go find mezzanine debt, or they'll actually go and find like a loan shark, a hard money lender that will lend it on the secondary market to them. And they're effectively 0% of their own equity is in the deal. And it's this concept of OPM, using other people's money, is the acronym. And I just don't like that. It's not successful in my opinion. I know that some people do it and some people have made it work, but let's talk about how you found some of the equity folks that you work with, mm-hmm. and how you've grown a portfolio, and what your approach is to what some people might look at as appropriate debt or realistic, sustainable debt, and what is kind of that danger zone, because I think there is a distinction for sure.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, because everybody jumps into real estate, and they think that the banks are able to give away a lot of money right now, right? It's not like it was 10 years ago, but like it's pretty easy to get financing on a lot of apartment buildings, and especially in commercial real estate. It's 90% based on the building and not the borrower. So everybody thinks, oh, it's easy access to capital. Now I use bank debt and actually agency debt, which is like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. But I use non-recourse debt, right? I use long-term debt. I use long-term amortization schedules. I use fixed interest rates and things like that. And the only reason I do that is because I'm a good steward of capital, and I know my business really, really, really well. Early on, the first 300-400 deals that I did not use any debt. I only used equity investors. I had partners that partnered up, that put the cash up, that they got maybe a big chunk of the deal, but we didn't have to go and get debt. People can get in a lot of trouble. And I think early on, I liked that I did it that way, because I probably would have done something stupid with bank debt, right? And so I think you make a really good point, as the more sophisticated you become, and the more not necessarily sophisticated, more educated you are in handling money and being a steward of capital, debt can be used as a good instrument to help you grow your business. But I think especially for anybody who's starting out, they don't need to. I would rather find somebody with cash who can be a joint venture partner on a deal by deal basis. And hey, you put up the money, I do the work, let's work together on this thing, and we're going to split it 50-50, 60-40, 80-20, whatever the split ends up being based on who's bringing what value to the table. So I think that's a really, really good way of doing it, because then you're not jammed up. Instead of going and having to, respond to a bank or a board of directors or some institution that if you don't check all the different boxes, they're going to foreclose on you. You don't need that on your record, especially, nobody needs that on the record. So instead, you can just sit down with your joint venture partner and say, hey, here's where we're at. Here's where the deal is. Here's where the market is. And you can be, reasonable people and talk through what the best options are, and then put a plan in place that way. So I 100% agree that especially early on when you're growing your portfolio and getting things started and building up that balance sheet, do it with equity, right? Do it with a partner who can just bring that cash. So I do agree with that. Where do you find that cash? I think there's so many people out there who are sitting on cash. There's a lot of people aren't dumb, right? Like, they're watching the stock market. How long can you have a bull market for in the stock market? I don't know. It's been essentially 4 or 5 years of a bull market, maybe longer. I don't even know. And if you've seen the stock market, it goes up and down over time. If you pay attention to cycles over time, and especially going into an election year, it always dips. So to pay attention and know that that's what people are thinking of in their head, and we have something that is tangible that they can get involved in, that is very predictable. Like, I feel a sense of responsibility of letting people know that this type of investment is available. Like, there's people who don't even know that they can go in and lend you money or partner up with you on real estate. And I think you're doing them a disservice if you're not talking to them that these are things that, educate them, let them know. You don't have to sell them on it. If you just, compare apples to apples of what the returns would look like and how they can partner up and the safety and security of some of these real estate investments over a traditional, stock market kind of investment, I think they're going to make the decision on their own that they want to go and partner up with you. And there is an unbelievable amount of money out there. If you're not familiar with self-directed 401ks or self-directed IRAs, there are trillions of dollars sitting in that people don't need to put into the stock market. They can put it with a custodian and then direct it themselves. They can lend you money as an actual promissory note. They can partner up as an equity partner on it. They can go buy gold with it and gold bars, and they can buy artwork. They can buy whatever they want with it. There's a lot of different things that you can do if you're with a self-directed IRA or self-directed retirement custodian. They're all over the place. So look up that, and there's a lot of people. I hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs. So I'm working with people and talking with people and engaging with people who have their own businesses. They're launching a product. They're selling their business. They're bringing on money on their own and looking to reinvest. And they have, in their traditional business, they understand that there's a perception of there's risk there, and they're trying to take whatever money they make and then put it into something stable, and they like real estate. It's an easy conversation to have. And they're too busy to be, breathing down your neck all the time, asking what's going on with your deal. And so I really like working with entrepreneurs, and partnering up with them from an equity standpoint on different projects. So that's usually where I raise most of my money from.
I have to share that one of the reasons I was so excited about this interview, because you're in the field of multifamily investing. There's a lot of clients of mine, real estate investors, that have had lots of success, have lots of wisdom to impart, but are a little bit reserved. They're a little bit not to themselves. I mean, they'll definitely share it with me one-on-one, especially if I'm grabbing coffee with them or lunch or dinner. And a lot of times it's as we're standing at the front of an apartment community that we're selling or that they're buying, they're imparting some wisdom to me. So I felt this obligation to share that with other people. And a lot of my clients are, like I said, reserved, and they're not really willing to go on this type of platform and share how they became successful or what tools they use or things that they implement to make that success happen repeatable and scalable. Mm-hmm. So you do teach this concept, you teach it to other people. And so if someone wants to know, Tim, how to get in touch with you or how to learn from you or what type of classes you offer, how do they approach that? How do they get in touch with you? And how do they learn more before we get into the second part of our interview?
Oh, I mean, Kyle, I appreciate it, man. So speaking on your point of a lot of investors, a little old school, right? Old school mentality, keeping everything close to the vest. They don't want to share. They don't want to, they think they're going to create competitors out there. And there might be a little bit of that, right? But for me, I think wealth is like sunshine, right? I think that there's a ubiquitous amount of it, an unlimited amount of it. You getting sunshine, Kyle, doesn't take any sunshine away from me, and I think you building wealth doesn't take any wealth away from me either. When you think about it, there are over 44,000 apartment buildings in the United States alone, over 100 units. One of those would change your financial future forever, right? And there are millions, maybe tens of millions of buildings under 100 units. So, I could show you deals that I did on a 45 unit apartment building that I made over $1 million on, right? And me and my partners made $1.5 million on a 48 unit apartment building right across the street over here in the span of less than 12 months. So you do a couple of those deals, you do one of those deals a year for 5 years, you're sitting on $3-4 million liquid. You got enough cash flow coming in to cover all your expenses, all your debt service, if you have debt on it, or you carve it up and you got cash flow and all sorts of different things. So, to me, I'm not creating competitors. I built my business. I come from the residential realm, right? So I have a staff, and then I started flipping single family rental properties, kind of like turnkey houses, and built up a management company. I had 30 people on staff, and found out that I was not a very good manager of people. I was kind of like an adult babysitter is what I felt like, at least in the property management realm. And so I asked myself, I said, how can I get involved in more deals without taking on more overhead? Because I don't like the overhead and the debt and that kind of stuff, right? That we were talking about before. And at the same time, it's a pretty cool way that maybe I can get some other people involved, partner up with them, joint venture. They can handle more of the boots on the ground and that kind of stuff. And I can do what I'm good at, which is more the marketing, finding deals, raising capital. If we're putting debt on the property, I have the balance sheet in order to do that, and the acumen in order to do that. And we're pretty good at the administrative and property management side, obviously. So I thought, what if I could create a way to joint venture and partner with other people who wanted to learn how to do this? They don't have my skill set. I don't have the time or the capacity to do the boots on the ground, oversee the value add project management, that kind of stuff. And I thought, how could I do that? And right around when I was thinking, I had people who pepper me with, hey, let's create a course. Let's do some event. But it was always like the sleazy sales stuff, right? Where you run to the back of the room and only the first 10 get this. And I'm like, it's not me, right? I'm a straight shooter. I try to give as much value as I possibly can in everything that I do. And there was a group that came super highly recommended. They said, hey, listen, we don't want you to be the guru that just teaches. We want you to be a do-ru, right? You just keep on going out, doing what you're good at. We'll handle all the logistics. We don't have an upsell. We don't have come out and there's a $50,000 course and then $100,000 course and all this other, we don't do that. But they said, hey, the only other thing that we have is a mastermind, and it's invite only. So they came highly recommended from a couple of mentors of mine. I sat down with these guys. Our values aligned. We really hit it off really well. And so a little over a year ago, we put together an event called Commercial Empire. And it essentially takes you through the complex world of commercial real estate and breaks it down to, I wouldn't say a third grade level, but maybe like a ninth grade level, right? Or like a sixth grade level. And especially if you have experience in the residential realm or some small multifamily stuff, we outline how we find deals, a lot of times off-market deals, sometimes direct-to-seller deals, how to build those broker relationships with quality brokers like you, how to underwrite these deals quickly, how to make offers on these things, making sure that if you are getting financing, you're putting the right financing in place, you're limiting your liability, you're limiting your personal risk, how to raise money, how to stay compliant with the SEC when you are raising money, how to oversee the value add project management, all the due diligence, put the scope of work together, manage contractors, keep them on time, keep them on budget, and then how to manage it and how to manage the management company in perpetuity so you can let this thing cash flow. And then different exit strategies on the back end, whether you're going to sell it or refinance it or whatever. So we go through A to Z on all that stuff. I offer all my information. Everything is an open book. I'm completely transparent with all that. You can go out and do deals on your own. But my hope is that people come in, they say, hey, listen, Tim, you got the balance sheet. and access to capital. I can bring deals, I can do the work. Tim, can you bring the money? And then there's a lot of other people who come in and say, hey man, this is way too much work. I don't want to do any of this. How about I bring money and can you put it in a deal for me? And so it's a really cool network, very high caliber people that we work with, and our reviews are just off the charts. So I'm really, really proud of it. And if anybody wants to talk further, go to commercialempire.com, fill out the form. My team will reach out to you within 24 hours and give you some more insight on that. But I usually do probably 3 or 4 events a year, and just kind of want to work with people that way. So it's pretty cool. It helps me build my business. It helps them get involved in projects that they couldn't previously get involved in. And, in that scenario, 1 + 1 = 3, right? We all build wealth together. So it's cool.
That's incredible. And the reason I asked is because I think that as a broker, and I am sitting down kneecap to kneecap with a lot of really smart people, a lot of people who have proven that they've had success over the long haul. And I'll have people kind of lean over and they're like, hey, will you remind me what a cap rate is? How do I calculate that? Or cash on cash return? How do I calculate cash on cash return? And it's not because they're not intelligent. It's just because they're like, look, it just kind of made sense to me. I see I'm bringing in more money than I'm spending, and this investment's made sense to me for 30 years. I don't need to figure out a cap rate. And so I think what's important is for courses like yours, or just education like yours, is it's demystifying commercial real estate investing. And like you said, having it still be something that's an honorable business, because the majority of commercial real estate is done in an honorable way. And most people assume that the late night, the seminars, and I remember I was holding an event just teaching people definitions of real estate. And they're like, oh, you're doing a seminar. And I was like, that feels really like cable TV, And so I think it's great that you're doing that, and you're doing it the right way, and you're limiting it so that you're not doing it like, on tour type of thing, where you're going from city to city and selling tickets and then doing the back of the conference room sales type of thing. Cause that is difficult. Okay. So a few things that I want to share is, one of the reasons why I feel like we're so aligned is Calibrate Real Estate. Our mission as a brokerage firm is to help people create generational wealth through real estate. Very simple. It's 11 words, but we're all about creating generational wealth, as you are. Legacy wealth holding. I mean, that's just right aligned. The other thing I love that you said is that you're not a guru, you're a guru. And I've always felt like I've led by example. And I love that someone is there that like, hey, I'm going to go forward. A great leader does that. They're a guru. They're not just some ivory tower saying this is what you should do. They show you, I can do this, and then I'll show you the way. And then I loved how you said wealth is like sunshine. The other analogy that I have used is, I'm a Christian, and I do at the end of the year, we go to a Christmas Eve service that's called a candlelight vigil, a candlelight service. And if you've been, sometimes a candlelight vigil is a memorial, remembering someone that's passed. But if you've ever done this for Christmas, what you'll see is that there's only one flame. And it's the flame, it's either the lighter or the match or whatever that lights the first one. And then each flame lights another flame. And I love that concept, because just because my flame is teaching you how to light up doesn't mean that I am then losing anything. In fact, that flame continues. And so I love that analogy of wealth is like sunshine. It's like, candlelight ceremony is the same type of thing where you can.
It's really good.
Love it. Okay. So we talked about partnerships at length. Let's talk about a partnership that went bad for you, because an old adage is the only ship that won't sail is a partnership. And let's talk about what having handcuffs is like, having golden handcuffs in a partnership, because that's a path you went down. And I do want to help people understand that not every partnership is a good one. And a lot of people are advocates for partnerships when they should not be in a partnership, and they should bootstrap it and do it on their own.
And so I've had some tough partnerships. One specifically is the one that I mentioned earlier in the show. And I think the issue with that, here's the thing. There's two sides to every story, right? And then the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So you can hear my version. You can hear their version. It's probably somewhere in the middle, right? I try to be as honest and straightforward, but we all tell ourselves these stories in our heads of what's going on, or what the other person's thinking in their head. And very rarely is it what's actually going on, right? And so what they were thinking about me, what I was thinking about them, probably totally convoluted and incorrect. And we each thought each other were bad guys, right? So when you get into a partnership initially, everybody thinks it's good. Everybody thinks it's going to be great forever. When you lose money, sometimes people change, right? When, God forbid, you make money, and as people can get really ugly, right? But you usually know who you're getting in business with. The issue is life happens, and sometimes it's not somebody's fault. Sometimes, what worked when you were single and you weren't married and you didn't have any kids, and you didn't have any obligations, doesn't work once you are married and you do have kids, you do have obligations and other responsibilities. Hey, you might live in Cleveland, Ohio. You might want to move to Tampa, Florida, right? You might live in Denver, Colorado. You might want to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I don't know. Like, things happen, life happens, things occur. And sometimes it's outside of your ability to, control some of those things, and businesses just kind of flake out, right? So for me, I don't like getting married to anybody other than my wife, right? I don't want to be married to any other people in business, but I love joint venture partnerships on a deal by deal basis. Because what happened to me when I was going through that situation, long story short, I was promised a salary. It was a minimal salary. It was taken away from me. And then we reinvested all the profits from the property. I didn't make a lot of money back. This is 2014, 15, 16, and 2013, 14, 15. And what happened is, we made money on paper, but there were no distributions made. And if I made $100,000 on paper, but I never got any of that money, how am I supposed to pay that tax bill? And it created a lot of stress. And I had a newborn baby on the way, and it just, more was expected out of me. I was doing 100% of the work. I'm seeing them as the passive investors getting majority of the share and just barking at me and taking things away, and they're probably seeing me of, hey, I set this kid up and we put him in a position where he can go out and buy 150 apartment units and all this other stuff. And so it's hard for me to say, these guys were awesome, right? We were great partners. I made them a lot of money and they helped me get set up. So I can't say anything bad, but when you're going through that and then they lawyer up and then you lawyer up and then, all this stuff's going on, like sometimes you can't see outside of what the situation that you're in. And it's very, very difficult. And I was in a mastermind group at the time, and somebody's like, dude, I went through a bad breakup. Here's what I did. Here's what I wish I didn't do. And really helped coach me through it. And one of the mentors was like, dude, hand it to the partners, or hand it off to an attorney. Let them deal with your partners. You just keep on going back and doing what you're good at, which is out making money. And I was brokering real estate, just try to keep food on the table for my family. And essentially I paid for my own broker's license. They wanted 67% of all my commissions that I made in the broker's side of things too. And it just got really, really ugly. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And, it's like, what am I going to do? I spent the past almost 4 years of my life just building up this portfolio. Like, now we got to sell it all. We're gonna have to liquidate everything. What am I going to do next? They're getting all their money back. Like, what? And a lot of times, again, you're stuck. You're in this confined. It was like so stressful. Like I've never had that much stress my entire life. And what's amazing is the way that some things that seem like a setback in the moment are really a setup for something greater in the future, right? And so for me, I didn't realize how much of a weight came off my shoulders by dissolving that partnership and just liquidating those assets. I was worried about losing 150 units that took me 4 years to build, but within the next less than 12 months, I was up to 400 units. And then, 36, 48 months later, I'm at almost 3,000 units today. That there's no way that would have happened if I was still in that partnership, feeling as much pressure as I did before. So, it was a very difficult time. But it's amazing how, when God closes a door, opens up a window kind of a thing, right? And there's other opportunities that present themselves that sometimes you just can't see when you're in the middle of all that fog. And but just kind of got to have some faith in it that it will happen. It'll happen for the best. And it was a good setup for me. And so, going back to the partnerships, again, I don't like getting married, but I love joint venture partnerships. If this one deal goes south, or, for this one deal, everybody knows what their responsibility is. And, for the next 12 to 18 months is really where the majority of work goes into, like one of my projects, the first initial 12 months, let's say, to stabilize, find it, raise the money, stabilize it, put good management in place, and then, either refinance it or whatever that looks like to hold on to it long term. That's in that short of a time frame, you can set very clear expectations about what everybody's responsible for doing. But to get married with somebody over many properties across, all your deals, you don't ever want to break up a partnership and have to liquidate your entire portfolio like I did. And so, I partner up with many joint venture partners. Many are return and repeat partners, but we're together because we love each other, right? If we don't want to do business together, we don't have to do business together, but we do business together because we love being in business together. And they're A players. I like to think of myself as an A player, and especially once you've had some experience in business, who's going to do what they're supposed to be doing and carry their weight. And so I do like joint venture partnerships. I don't need to be Superman. You don't need to be Wonder Woman, right? Like you don't have to do all aspects, especially in commercial real estate deals, because there's a lot of equity in these projects. There's a lot of profit in these things that you can carve up amongst all the different A players, where it incentivizes everybody to be involved, and they can focus on what they're good at. You can focus on your unique ability. And again, rising tide floats all boats kind of a thing. And when you can surround yourself with A players, I love doing that. But again, it's got to be on a deal by deal basis.
Tim, one of the things I love that you said, and I have said this often, because I've been in some partnerships, both where I'm the minority partner. I've also been in some 50-50 partnerships that sort of go on in perpetuity. Some of them have had legal structure, and others have been more of kind of a handshake deal, like, in brokerage, where it's kind of like, look, we're always going to work together on these deals, and this is what our split structure is going to be, but we don't have like a partnership agreement set up. And then I've been in some legal structure of companies where there was a very defined partnership. And that rung true to me. It struck a nerve, actually, when you said profitability without distributions, and you've got that tax bill sitting there, because that is something I have seen the hard way. And it's great. It's like, hey, on paper, we're doing awesome. We aren't going to release any of it because we love our retained earnings. And it's tough. It's really tough. And especially when you're not able to make the decisions because you're not the majority partner. So I love the fact, and I've said this often about Courtney and myself, I'm married to one person, and that's my high school sweetheart, Courtney. And we are linked on everything that we do together. Outside of that, it's a case-by-case basis, because I only have one spouse, and that is a relationship that I work on every single day. And I work on making it excellent. And I can tell you and cater that way as college sweethearts. The thing I want to ask you about is, in that valley, in that period where you're like, people are lawyering up and it's getting tough, and you feel like, they have handcuffed you. They're trying to tap into your brokerage income. It's not just what you're doing for them on a wealth building standpoint, but they're also trying to limit your ability to make money. It became, I think, spiteful. And that's just my reflection. I'm not saying that's what they did, but how did you and Kate, what was your relationship like at that point? And what were some things that you were talking about as you were going through that as true partners with each other? And I know you've got a 4-year-old daughter, Penelope. I'm not sure that she was born yet necessarily, but it was probably right around that time where you guys were pregnant, or maybe you had a newborn, and you've got your 2-year-old Hudson. So as a family, how do you guys talk about things that go at work, especially when they're not going well?
Yeah. So, in that situation, obviously I got a newborn at home, right? And I come home, I'm not showing up. Like when something is that bad at work and there's that much stress, it's easily sensed by your spouse, even by your newborn daughter, right? And so I wasn't the dad because I wasn't present. I was always worried about the stuff that was going to happen. And this it only took probably 2 or 3 weeks, right? But it felt like an eternity. It felt like, I go back, I remember vividly walking around the yard, talking to my attorney and having all these conversations, and like, what am I going to do? And I had some equity built up. Like, if we sold everything, I think I walked away with about $500,000. So it was like a significant, and that was my entire net worth at the time, right? So that was everything. And the salary that I had was $3,000 a month before that they took away about a year and a half before. And so like, I didn't have a lot of money. And so all my net worth was in this. And I'm like, I've worked so hard to build this all up. And now I might lose it all, right? Now what am I going to do? And my wife's like, listen, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. Like, we're fine. I'm still working. I can cover the bills. You can go out and, start something new, which was like, when you're inside of those confines, you can't see outside the smoke and you can't see outside of your current situation, the box that you're in. You just need somebody from a different level to say, hey, listen, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. And to have that support network there and to have somebody who's like, I got you, is a big deal. And I got that both from her and I got it from my mentors in the mastermind group that I was in as well. And so, take a deep breath, you kind of exhale, and you realize, let me see if I can be reasonable with these people. So we got on a phone call. We said, hey, listen, the only people getting rich in this scenario is going to be the attorneys. Let's sit down and let's see if we just hash this thing out. And so we came to an agreement. We decided to liquidate everything. They got paid all their equity back, all their cash that they invested back. And then we just carved up all the proceeds, 67-33. And over the course of the next 12 months, we liquidated everything, but we also terminated, which was a big deal for me, to terminate the exclusive agreement that I had with them to go and buy investment property. So now I was able to go and start building my portfolio while that was being sold. And it helped in a big ways to kind of let me keep on rolling before that last building sold. So, it's one of those things where having the support network and, does my wife want to know everything? Like, there's some things where, you stub your toe in business or with a certain person, that they're a good person. If I tell my wife about it, she carries things a little bit longer than I do. Right. Like, I'm okay with getting past it. Like, if me and my buddies getting a quarrel and we get in a fight and we say some stupid stuff, we call each other up. We're like, hey man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. And we get past it pretty quickly. When girls fight, sometimes they can internalize that for a long time. And so I don't ever want to burden my wife with all the stuff that goes wrong in business. Right. So I don't want to burden her with that. And at the same time, I don't want her to hold resentment with somebody that I know I'm going to have a long-term relationship with. But at the same time, I mean, we're partners, right? We're partners in life. You gotta share some of the wins. You gotta share some of the kicks in the teeth that you get, and let her know what's going on. And so I'm actually she came home from work a couple years ago when Hudson was born, and we're kind of going through something right now where, I want to kind of incorporate her into the business, but at the same time, I don't know if I want all of our conversations to be about work. But also we'd be able to connect at a higher level, I think, in our relationship if she was more familiar with what was going on inside the operation, So we're talking through a lot of that stuff. And I think relationships and marriages are something you're constantly working on, just like you're working on it with your wife all the time. And just open communication, right? And setting clear expectations and going on date nights and talking and finding out what their needs are and how you can help meet them, and taking on 100% responsibility for the relationship versus, thinking it's 50-50. It's not 50-50. You got to be willing to bring everything to the table. And just like you do in your business, like as the owner of my business, I'm 100% responsible for it. Even if somebody didn't pull their job, I should have hired them better. I should have trained them better. I should have done something better. Should have set them up better, given them the better tools. I have that same mindset in my relationship with my wife of I need to be 100% responsible for this. So I need to schedule date nights. I can't expect her to do that. I need to get her flowers. I need to, do all these different things to make sure that, the home life is there too.
It's important. There's two big takeaways from everything you just shared there that I wanted to maybe distill down. One is, I had mentioned earlier that I've taught a Dave Ramsey class and I've read almost all of his books. Met him in person, and Dave Ramsey in his book Entree Leadership talks about the mirror test. And the mirror test is if something going wrong in your business, just look right into the mirror. And there's two things that happen when you do that. Is one, you've got no one else to blame but yourself because you're looking in the mirror. But two, the best part about that is the one person that can change it is you. So you are both the product of what you've done, but also the solution. And I think that's really important. Then the second part is a great proverb that I've held with me for a long time. It's Proverb 11:14. And it basically goes to say where no advice is, people fail, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And that's a huge element of the way I operate with masterminds, just trusted friends. I'm constantly learning. I have people on this podcast that after we finish taping the stuff, I swear the stuff that we do right before the podcast airs and after sometimes is the best content, because they say, hey, look, you're dealing with this. You asked me this, or let me connect you with this person. And they fast track you to the solution. You're still finding the solution, but they get you there much, much faster. So I love that. Okay. We're going to finish our show. And I always finish our show with a question that is born with some advice. And we've talked a lot about advice. We've talked about real estate investing, of course, but then just also life advice and growing a business and being an entrepreneur. So this question is based on a song that I heard called Dear Younger Me. And it's the advice that you wish you knew when you were 22. So it's the advice that you would write in a letter to yourself now that you're older, now that you've gotten some bumps and bruises along the way. You have survived despite some setbacks, and we talked a lot about this. So after thinking through all the things we talked about, what's the advice that you'd give to your younger self? Or maybe if you're mentoring someone in their 20s in a mastermind application and they're going through something right now, what's some advice that you'd carry on to someone in their 20s?
Phenomenal question. And it would be to join a mastermind earlier. I think a lot of people, like I understood the idea of mentorship, right? And so I found mentors. The issue is I found the mentors that I didn't want to be like, right? Because this is when the market was bad. Like there were people that I worked with and I looked up to, and they would tell somebody they're going to go work a short sale on their house and then rent it all out, collect all the rental income, not work the short sale, and just keep the money and let it get foreclosed on. And I was like, who am I working for right now, right? And so I was mentored by people. Some of them show you the right things to do and how you want to be when you're older and more successful, right? And then there's other people who are mentors in an equal capacity of saying, hey, here's what I don't want to be like. Here's what something I would never do and some way I would never operate. And so I like the mastermind idea. And for anybody who doesn't know, it's a mastermind, it's a collective group of, like-minded type people. You don't want just like group think where everybody's thinking in the same direction at the same time. You want a little bit of analytics and a little bit of, like let's question some ideas. But the idea, like I went to my first mastermind in February of 2015. And I went into a room, there were maybe 15 people sitting in a circle. And the amount of brain power and collective insight that everybody had in that room was hundreds of years of experience in both life and business. And so when you go in there and you're like, hey, here's the number one struggle that I'm facing right now in business, or a lot of times it ends up being something in life or relationships or health or spirit or, whatever any of those things are. It's not always financial based or business based. Somebody across the table, like I'd mentioned before, is going to say, hey, I've been there, man. I went through that 6 months ago, 18 months ago, 6 years ago. And here's what I did that worked really, really well for me. Here's what I did that didn't work well that I would not suggest doing. Or here's somebody that I can put you in touch with. And it was almost like I had 15 mentors in the room giving me different advice from different life experiences of their own. And I can then sit back and think about all the different things that people said and digest it and figure out what's going to be the work best for me versus just having one mentor and only focusing with that one person. So for me, I think joining a mastermind, and I think what was the biggest leap forward, and what a lot of people don't realize is they go out to a single event or a single mastermind event or whatever it is, and they get the information that they need that gets them to the next level. And what they don't realize is that at the next level, there's another level of hurdles, right? There's another level of problems. There's another level of struggles and things you're going to have to get through. You have to grow as an individual in order to get to the next level. And so it's important to find a group that you can match up with at least, maybe once a quarter. And you implement that one strategy. I usually go to I'm a member of 5 different masterminds, and I run one also. So I'm in 6 masterminds. I spend 6 figures a year on masterminds because I believe in them so much. And for me, I go there and I try to get, here's my number one struggle right now. And if I can solve that problem, then I know I'm going to be in a better place. I don't try to go and solve all my problems. I don't try to solve even 3 problems or even 2 problems. I want to solve one problem and the biggest struggle in my life or in my business at that time. And I respect the people that I'm in. in the room with, and the business acumen and the life acumen that they have. And they give you all they got. It's a super honest, you want to find a group that's very honest, that's very open, that is non-judgmental, and at the same time keeps strict confidentiality, that they're not going to go talk to other people about what's going on without your permission. Right. And that's all the groups that I'm in is, you can say whatever you want in this room. Nobody will judge you. We're going to give you honest feedback. We're going to give you honest insight and some direction on how to get past that hurdle. And so that's a very powerful place to be in, and it'll advance your business and your life in a way that you could never imagine. So I would have joined a mastermind not when I was 29 at the time. I would have joined when I was 22.
Love it. And I've been a part of multiple masterminds, and I will share from my experience the reason why they work is there's something that happens when you're sitting across from someone and you feel like the recording isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
No one's recording what's going on. You can be vulnerable, you can be humble, and they have some life experience that they can share, and you don't have to take their advice. That's the other part of it too. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's a multitude, not just a single person. So I would say that now masterminds are a term that I think has gotten highly publicized lately.
Yeah.
Masterminds are not anything new. One of the books that I've read and enjoyed, and it was suggested to me forever, and I finally read it, was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. For those of you who don't know who Napoleon Hill was, he was basically commissioned by Andrew Carnegie, one of the wealthiest people in the world at the time that the book was written. And Napoleon Hill was basically given Andrew Carnegie's network of friends. And these are really, I'm not going to say the names in it because you'll read them. You're like, wow, this is an incredible group of people in the industrialization of America. And Napoleon Hill basically spent decades putting this book together to figure out what the secret for success was for a lot of these very, very well-known business people at the turn of the last century in the 1900s. And a lot of it comes down to a mastermind. Some of it comes down to some other personal habits, but that's a very easy book to read. It's a classic. It was written over a century ago. I would say that's the thing to go back to is Think and Grow Rich. I will say also that the word mastermind has evolved into several other things. You'll hear people talk about forums. If you're in a specific type of mastermind program, they'll call theirs forums. You'll also hear people talk about life groups or small groups if you're in maybe a faith application. But the whole point is it's people that you can walk life with that have the ability to speak into your life because it's not the first time you've met them. So what I would say is, from my own personal experience, the idea that you're going to cook up a mastermind in one weekend with a group of people that you've never met before, I just don't see that working. And I'm not saying you're advocating for that. I'm saying that it sounds like you have also had some very powerful mastermind groups where it's repetitive, you're going often, and it's not every week that you're meeting either. You're taking some time away, and then you're bringing the new set of quarterly issues to that group and figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in being in the same group because they see you growing. They know what your long-term goals are. They know where you started. And when you have a destination and a starting point, you can then create the path in order to get there. Right. And so these are people who are familiar with you. It's really not until maybe like the third or even the fourth mastermind event that you go to that you really start getting into a stride. These people know you and you know these people, and you can really get the most value out of it. So I'd sign up for a minimum a year or 2 years, make a commitment, and you're going to be amazed at not only the extrinsic growth, the things that you can actually quantify and measure like your finances, but the intrinsic growth that happens with your relationships and your mindset is just, it's out of this world. It's unbelievable.
Tim Bratz, I appreciate your time. I've said this to a lot of our guests that the value, the actual dollar value of someone spending an hour of their time with me, if we added those up, there's a lot of high producers that have been on this podcast. It's a big sacrifice. So I appreciate you imparting your wisdom to our podcast audience. People are out there listening, and I will share with you that oftentimes I feel like probably more knowledge, more experience, more benefit than the audience does just by communicating with you. So for what it's worth, this was a huge treat to me. And I'm sure that there are other people out there that learned as well. But a lot of the reason why I do the podcast is it really helps me grow, and I'm a learner along with our audience. So I just appreciate your time today. And for our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, for Jamie Richardson, who set this up, she was the matchmaker that got this all set up. Before we go, I just want to make sure, Tim Bratz, we've got the ability for you to share, just again, real quick, a way for people to connect with you if they're interested in learning more about real estate investing, specifically in multifamily. How do they get connected with you? What's a good resource?
Well, once again, man, thank you for having me. I think we've had an awesome conversation. I got a lot of value on this side of the conversation as well. So appreciate what you do and all the love and the giving mindset and mentality that you have, Kyle. I'm really active on social media, specifically Facebook. So find me on Facebook. I'm always putting out free content on that. My website's legacywealthholdings.com, and you can, I'm putting a lot of free content out on that too. And then if you're looking for something more formal and you want to learn how to go out and buy apartment buildings and find these deals and oversee the value add and come up with different exit strategies and raise private money and all that stuff, then you just go to commercialempire.com and fill out the form, and my team will reach out to you. And we'll connect with you on that front. But definitely connect with me on Facebook. I'm real active on there.
Tim Bratz, thank you so much for your time. For my podcast producer, Kayla Davis, I'm Kyle Malnati. And as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.